I was talking to a peer tech company. It was like, yeah, we built our own harness and we use that. And like at the time, that just struck me as like, I don't understand. Like, why would you do that? Now in June, like it makes a lot more sense to be able to have that better control and over the total experience and possibly the cost as well.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to HangarDX. This is a podcast about developer experience and how engineering teams solve productivity challenges at scale. I'm your host, Ankit Jain, co founder of Aviator. Aviator is a verification platform for AI generated code that creates guardrails for reducing AI slop. Today, my guests are Kevin and Chris, joining in from Dropbox, who recently built a platform called Nova. And we will be diving into that and learning more about how they build the platform and how it's performed. But before that, Kevin and Chris, do you want to introduce? Maybe I'll pass it to Kevin first.
Sure, yeah. Hi, my name's Kevin. I've been at Dropbox for a few years and currently with Chris on the AI DevTools team. I am based in Cambridge and I was born and raised here, went to school at Northeastern, so I've been in Boston my whole life.
Hey, I'm Chris Hodges. Been at Dropbox for about 5 years now. I kind of jumped into the tech industry during COVID, which looking back was a really good time to make that jump, and have been working in the observability space at Dropbox and up until last year, where we had like a hackathon in person in San Francisco, and like Claude Code came out, and it was like the most amazing thing in the world. And so I kind of pulled myself over here to work on developer experience on AI dev tools, which has been a blast.
Amazing. I mean, obviously, the DevTools space itself has changed completely. And you folks built Nova. So maybe before we kind of like get started, can you give an overview of what Nova is? Chris, I'll just pass it to you this time.
Yeah. So with Nova, like what we wanted was a platform where people could talk or use their agents in a way that like that didn't necessarily disrupt their local development flow. So we've got a large mono repo, over 20 gigabytes. That takes a while to like set up a new like environment, right? To start on work. And so I think one of the earliest wins has been helping people who are making like simpler type changes, like very quickly be able to spin up a development environment, like in it's kind of a hybrid of production and CI environment, and be able to like talk back and forth with an agent and be able to like create a pull request after that. We've seen a lot of adoption. We've made some mistakes along the way, but we've got a vision of like where we want to take it forward to see it like be even more helpful than just the simple jobs that it's mostly running now.
Can I
Very
add
cool.
that
Yes.
Nova currently acts as a coding agent like a Claude Code or a Codex if you want that. And it also acts as a platform internally where many services call out to Nova for their coding jobs.
Very cool.
Just
So
both
does
at
it
the same time.
also run locally?
No,
Okay. So
it
it's
is totally
entirely a
autonomous.
background. Okay. Got it. So maybe share a little bit about like what was the experience of developers at Dropbox using AI tools before you decided to build Nova? But like where were like the big bottlenecks, friction? I think Chris already mentioned a little bit about like the size of the repository itself. But like was that sort of like the main anchor?
Yeah, I'll say like there's a lot of fragmentation amongst the tools that we use. So we have a lot of different AI tools that our developers can use locally, and like that diversification is great. Like we keep like getting the best of like what all the different labs are putting out as far as coding tools, and we love that competition. But that can also mean it's a little harder to like get things set up. I'm thinking like integrations, MCP server kind of things, like getting that local environment perfect across all like the different platforms is kind of tricky. So it's nice to have a place where it's just kind of automatically set up for you to be able to call tools um, and again have that separate workspace that's away from your local one. Because another thing is with these tools comes a lot of people wanting to work a lot more in parallel, right? Like low whip used to be a thing, but now people are wanting to work on 3 4 5 things at a time. And so yeah, having that extra environment like
Mhm.
helps people be more productive.
So did you folks actually had remote developer environments before that were maybe like not using AI tools, or was all the development before Nova done locally?
Yeah, so engineers at Dropbox have like coder instances, and you can create multiple coder instances if you'd like. I currently work with multiple, but a lot of developers would just have one. Like that, that was very regular. Is they have one coder instance and then a local version of their remote instance, like a repo that's kept in sync with the remote one. And they would work on one thing at a time. And one of the things that Nova is so important for is that you could spin up 12 instances of Nova and it will have 12 versions of the repo clone and 12 different agents that work in parallel. Um, yeah, I think people are working with multiple dev boxes like much more commonly now than they were in the past. But it's still like one of the main benefits of having a cloud agent, right?
Very cool. Before we kind of like dive more into Nova, maybe let's talk a little bit about your teams itself, right? So, Chris, you mentioned kind of like you joined this team, which kind of like got formed recently. Was it like an AI experience team? Is it different than developer experience? Do you have like a different platform team, or is it sort of like everyone is now collectively responsible for this AI experience, AI adoption as well? Like, is it sort of like, is there a specific agenda or like a objective for a specific team? Um, yeah, Kevin.
I mean, I think Chris would probably answer this better. We're
Sure.
we're
All right,
actually
let's
part
do
of
Chris.
the app platform org now. So now we're one of like a couple different teams that do developer experience. But Chris can probably talk about the whole AI space in Dropbox better.
Yeah, so like our team just got renamed from AI Dev Tools to like Agentic Experience. So like just it's just a very new space, right? And we're all trying to figure this out as we go along. But there are a lot of ways in which we cross cut amongst different organizations outside developer productivity, and so like trying to form those partnerships and figure out like how we can help developers use AI across the software development lifecycle, not just for like the coding part, is a big part of where we're headed.
We may own Claude Code and the Codex, like implementations within Dropbox, but like there's another working group that got stood up recently that owns the skill management in the repo. Like they created some tooling to automatically create skills in like the Claude folder and the Codex folder. How do you link those, or how do you like not duplicate those, as well as like a bunch of other things related to that, like linting skills. So we don't own all of this stuff, right? Like this stuff is so new that we're constantly standing up working groups and temporary teams to tackle some of these problems, I think.
Very cool. I mean, actually, this is great to hear because, like, we're also hearing a lot that there is more like platformization of AI to some degree, which is happening. This is like, post token maxing era where
Yeah.
everyone was building their own skills, everyone was building their own tools. Now, sort of like having organizations having sort of like a central strategy around how to kind of like enable developers. Are there like specific kind of like goals or metrics type of things that you track in terms of like the adoption, or sort of like if you built Nova, sort of like what's the usage of Nova like?
Yeah, so we track both like weekly active users as well as getting like CSAT scores back. So we use DX and we get quarterly surveys that kind of give us feedback from our users on like what's good, what's bad. So that has been helpful and also humbling because it turns out like it's really hard to build something that like you're competing in the same space as like Claude and Codex, right? So yeah,
We were one of the lowest internal products rated at Dropbox, but we were also the one that got the single most like comments and votes on. So
Interesting.
what it signals to me is that people care about it and they like the vision and they want it to be good, and it's not good enough yet. So it's a good place to be, I think, actually.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think we kind of like also see similar patterns where, background agents task are still something which is people use it for like one-off small things, but like still it feels like a little bit of overhead when you have to do more complex work. So kind of like speaking of that, maybe we can talk a little bit now into Nova's capabilities itself. I would love to especially understand, like, reading your blog, which you published, there were like some thoughts around like, Flaky test management or like migration upgrades, those capabilities, which are sort of like more like toil work that developers typically don't want to do. Are those like you're seeing more common use cases of it? Are there specific reasons why these use cases are becoming as sort of like your first target or like first type of tasks that you're dealing with in Nova?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, at least in my opinion, one of the reasons that tasks like that are being tackled first. And relating to, like, you're asking for the limitations of Nova. One of the problems is that Nova, when you run these jobs, it just makes code changes. It doesn't actually run like a container to test them, right? Not yet. This is something that's in progress. It's coming very soon for us. But like, that means that something like a Selenium test, like, fixing a Selenium test is nice and easy. You could fix the Selenium test and then run it in CI. Like, we already have a system to run that in CI and give you the video from it. Sorry, these are playwright tests now, actually. So that's a great way to ensure that the changes are correct without requiring that DevBox to be launched every single time a Nova session runs yet. But I'm hoping that, that's something that once we get those DevBoxes running, like, Nova can actually expand to further use cases in the future. And also, I should mention that those things, like the deflaking of the test use case, is an example of a service that's calling out to Nova. So there's another service that exists that creates like Nova jobs that users can continue to interact with after the initial run.
Yeah, I can add a little more color on the deflakes thing. So we've got a platform called Flakes, which helps like detect if you've introduced a flaky test, and then like it'll go and create like a Jira ticket and assign it to a team, right? And a lot of times this ends up like on the plate of a very busy like on-call engineer or very busy teams who don't have time to prioritize these things. And so like this was just a great example of like Toil that we thought we could help with. And so like the idea is to like look at both like the failing and passing logs of the job and like try to get some clues there just based on logs, like where things were going wrong, and then kind of spin it up with an agent to like create a hypothesis of like why it's failing, code up a fix, and then run it, a couple hundred times to see like, did we actually fix it? There's pitfalls along the way. Sometimes just like adding a retry is not the best thing you can do for the test, right? You're just papering over something else. So we've definitely had to kind of iterate on that prompt. But I think the thing is with like, we really wanted to start somewhere that's reducing toil and trying to do it in areas where we had more confidence that like what the AI was going to produce was going to be something that like developers would accept with like a high quality.
Very interesting. I think it'll be interesting to at least compare this with existing cloud-based background agent tools that exist out there. What do you think are the key components which are missing in those tools?
Do you mean at other companies or offerings from like?
Yeah, like kind of like if you think about like Cloud Code has Cloud Code Web, I think, and then sort of like Devin has sort of like Devin agents, and I'm sure there's like other companies. Like we also have a product like we call Runbox, which is somewhat similar. So
yeah, man, I think the key thing is that it's just like we have the SDK for Cloud Code and Codex, right? So like we get all the power that they offer. It's not that hard to build an interface on top of it, to be frank. Like building has never been better, and we can build it faster and iterate faster and care more about what our devs worry about. But I think, at least in my opinion, the key thing is that they just can't integrate with the stuff like we can. Internal Dropbox stuff is just not going to integrate with Codex like cloud agents properly in the near future, unless they do something very different. And when that happens, right, we can use our integration kind of like platform that we've made that plugs into Nova, and we could like provide that to a Codex cloud agent in the future. But even then, there's some stuff that they would be missing. I think it really is like the fact that Nova is plugging into a lot of Dropbox stuff natively.
Yeah, and I would add on to that, like you've got the side that's like there's a complex like Bazel build infrastructure, right? That's using things like remote caching and stuff. And so like if I were a startup, I would absolutely be using one of these cloud hosted tools, right? It doesn't really make sense to build your own, but in our case where we have a very specialized build process, and also the idea of like it's going to be easier for us to get buy-in from like security and privacy teams if we're calling things like internally and like data is not leaving our environment, right? And the only way you can really get that is by like running on-prem. So
yeah, we had problems recently where we've been talking about how Nova is going to handle like our most sensitive tier of data here at Dropbox. And it's like, I just don't think that conversation is happening in the same way if it's an external tool, right? Like,
right.
That could be like a 6-month review and like iteration cycle to get that working. But for us, it's like, other services internally have already done this. Have already handled that type of data. So there's like a path that exists, and we could actually do it in a way that might make security happy.
Yeah. And like we take that stuff super seriously, which is like it's a big part of the brand, right? And so like, um, yeah, security is always top of mind when we're working on any of this stuff.
I know it kind of like also goes into this whole concept that you also wrote in the blog post around Nova being a platform versus point solutions. So maybe you can share a little bit about, what makes Nova a platform versus point solutions. If teams actually build single tools approaches, what are the shortcomings of that, Chris?
Yeah, for me, the distinction here is that like not only do we have that web UI, but we're using like a fully featured like gRPC API to be able to call it from
Okay.
anywhere in production, right? So if Nova were like a point solution, like it would just kind of be tied to this web interface, and like other teams wouldn't really be able to build on top of it. And so I guess what makes it a platform is like it's the canonical way to like in the fastest way possible spin up like a development environment in our cloud environment and have agents there ready to do like whatever. And so we've seen adoption, 20 probably plus use cases of teams using Nova to build like their own stuff. So that's been pretty cool.
Can I
Interesting.
add?
Yes.
I haven't seen. I know like Ramp Inspect has like a good, or actually I haven't seen on Ramp Inspect or the Slack one or Shopify. I haven't seen them as platformized. I'm not sure if they are or not, and maybe I missed it, but it seems to me like we might be a little bit special in how platformized we are. And I think that there's a huge advantage to being both a platform and like I don't know, I don't want to call it a point solution, but we have a web interface to do a coding session like you might do in a Codex or Cloud Code. And I think having both, they actually are like multiplicative, because if you have a platform solution that launches a Nova job and you
Hmm.
don't like the result of it, you can enter the web UI and continue it, right? And that makes the platform better, and it makes the web UI like more important.
Very interesting. Um, I might be remembering it wrong, but there was a mention also of potentially you tried using Goose. Are you familiar with Goose?
Yes.
Do you want to
That
share
was
anything about that? Like, what
that
was the experimentation like?
I mean, so NovaWave was a product of some work that I did on another team that
Okay.
was kind of like merged into the Nova team's work. And we both had used Goose probably because the security team just said it was okay, I'm going to guess. But I didn't have any like necessarily strong complaints about Goose. I don't know, Chris, did you have a problem with it? I thought it was fine.
Yeah, like Claude came along and like, yeah, just really excited about it, right? So like the
Yeah.
things we were learning to do in Claude locally, like we were wanting to do with the SDK, right? There's that Cloud Code SDK is just so good. That
I see.
and so now we're like putting the Codex, SDK in there as well, so that you can choose between the two. And have that flexibility.
I see.
I think we have locally hosted models, and so Goose is the kind of thing that might be nice in the future, like an open code or whatever, to run those instead of having to go through Anthropic.
When you say locally hosted models, you mean like sort of like open source models, or these are sort of like hosted through Bedrock type of proxies?
Both. So like having Bedrock access, but also hosting like our own GPUs,
Interesting.
open source models.
I mean, actually, this is a conversation I feel like now I'm having very regularly. Like, this is the third conversation in the last week where people are concerned about the pricing and the cost of rising cost. And also, I think it is bringing in this whole term. I don't know if you've heard of like harness engineering, where there is a strong interest from people like yourselves, right? Like to actually own the harness yourself. And I think owning the harness yourself provides you with the leverage and capability to, one, not just swap out models, but two, own the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Did you ever see the Headroom? Headroom was a repo released recently by some Netflix engineer. I don't know if it's personal or if it's with the company, but they've just figured out a way to make token usage lower without degrading performance. It's
Interesting.
some layer between the harness and the model that like I don't know, maybe it like cuts out like words and like thinking words. I have no idea, but apparently it reduces token usage by like 40%, and he has like 0% degradation in performance.
Interesting. Have you used it yourself as well?
I haven't touched it yet. I just saw that it was on, LinkedIn or whatever.
Nice. Yeah. No, but I think like definitely this aspect of owning the platform itself makes a lot of sense. And I think I'm seeing definitely more people do it. One is like you're actually somewhat similar to how there was this movement of building an internal developer platform even 5 years ago, right? It wasn't really that long ago. I think kind of like some of the same philosophy is getting applied now here for your AI platform as well, just because this provides you with like future proofing, right? If you own this ecosystem, swapping the models as they get better becomes easier, and you can actually like add a lot more knowledge and context from your own business.
Yeah, I was at a conference back in February, and somebody I was talking to at a peer tech company was like, "Yeah, we built our own harness and we use that." And like at the time, that just struck me as like that is, I don't understand. Like, why would you do that? And like, yeah, now in June, like it makes a lot more sense. Like you say, just to be able to have that better control and over the total experience and possibly the cost as well.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think a harness is like a pretty low level piece of software, all things considered. It's probably the kind of thing that will be very standardized as we move forward. Like there are probably some features and ways to manage context that are not going to vary between the harnesses. I bet you that Anthropic and OpenAI are figuring the same things out independently right now about how to manage context best and do different things with these harnesses. And I feel I don't know how much innovation there really is there. Like after a year or two of them iterating on this stuff, are the harnesses going to be almost identical? Probably. And I bet you someone's going to release an open source one that is almost identical to that as well once this knowledge like leaks out, right? I don't know if I would build a harness myself. I mean, I feel like this is maybe just something that is open for debate, but I kind of view it as something where it's like you should probably just use the Cloud Code SDK, at least in my opinion.
I mean, I think Chris was also talking about like open code, for instance, right? Like, which is already
Yeah.
technically an open harness. If it also depends on how you define harness. I think I still feel over time people would want to own the harness, right? Which is like how much can you build on top of it? It doesn't have to be built from scratch, but it gives you more capabilities to manage and modify.
Yeah, so I mean, we're actually building on. I mean, that's kind of what we do here is building on top of that harness. We do that as well as the platform stuff to launch these pods.
Right. Interesting. I know kind of like we're going to come close to time, but I would love to at least understand, like, what were some of the challenges? You were also talking about, like, some failures potentially while building Nova. So maybe you can kind of like give us a little bit of timeline, journey, how you got, like, when you started the project, what were some of the initial challenges you had, and sort of like what are some of the big bottlenecks you have right now that you're working on? Chris?
Yeah, I will say one thing is just having like reliability built in. So like we're at the stage now where like we need to build out SLOs and like get more serious about our alerting so that like the user experience is good, right? I think another thing is back to like talking about like simple tasks versus more complex things is like how to build better like planning and integrations in so that like you can take a feature like across the full like life cycle of development and go from like design and like research and all the way to the end of like rolling the change out, like seeing what's happening with the feature flag, like turning off the feature flag, turning on, like following it all the way out to production. So like that's kind of our vision. I think first we've got to like really get our like reliability under control, which is something we've invested a lot in this half, and I think we're gonna see reward from that.
Yeah, I think that was the main thing that caused the low DX score was that we had a lot of failures and the service was slow. Things that are fixed now. I could talk actually about a key like lesson I learned. So I mentioned briefly that I was on a different team working on like a similar project and kind of joined forces with the Nova team. That project was one where with no interactivity, we were launching agentic jobs to fix locations in the code base based on a description. And the key thing after doing a bunch of user research that I kind of realized while doing this, and this was like kind of 2 years ago, right at the birth of agentic stuff, was that because agentic stuff makes coding so much faster and easier, the level, this was kind of my realization that everyone had 2 years ago, is that like stuff is moving up just like a tier of thinking, right? And what that meant for me designing these tools was that rather than launching tiny jobs across many little locations, like I thought would have been useful, people actually want to like manage this themselves. Like the tools are so powerful that they want to be able to uh, work with it and manage all of these code changes in one session. I thought that this was going to be limited to like making typing fixes, and you make 100 of them and I have 100 PRs, right? But because this stuff is so powerful and you can ask the agent about what it's doing, why it's doing it, you can just describe what to do. It's just better for these people to have basically what we have now, which is like a agentic harness, right? So you can say, you can just paste in, here's 100 locations, go fix them all, and the agent can just do it now because it's smart enough. So that totally changed the paradigm from what I was approaching, from how I was approaching this previously.
So what you're saying is it's sort of like a little bit more interactive versus completely hands-off.
Yes, and the interactivity gives people like a totally new paradigm to work with. And I was kind of trying to map on like agents can write code now onto the old paradigm, I think. And I was more afraid in the past of like what the agent was going to output, right? Again, everyone's going through this transition, but like we had all of these commands built in to like check, like deterministic things to check the agent output. And a lot of those we have moved to be more agentic since then.
Oh, interesting. So you moved from deterministic checks to more agentic, so as in like more predictive in nature. Tell me a little bit more about that.
It seems to me, well, before it was any small code change, I would run a command immediately after and feed it right back into the agent. Kind of seems to me like now you can just tell the agent what's right and what's wrong and give it the tools to do it. And so it can do that like small iteration, like the micro iterations faster. And then once it pushes the code, it can do like a check with our CI system, a longer, more deterministic iteration. Right. So we can almost definitely have it correct and then ensure that it's correct in a more expensive, slower way after the fact.
Got it. So shorter feedback loops are predictive, and then the final checks are deterministic.
Yeah, because I think the agent's the fastest, cheapest way to do those short loops.
That makes a lot of sense. Very interesting. So kind of like, given that you're already talking about, the interactive versus hands-off, what are your folks' opinion on orchestrators?
Yeah, this is a great segue. It's something we've been thinking a whole lot about lately. Let me just give an example of like a pain point without having an orchestrator in the loop, which is like one of the early kind of experiments I was doing with Nova was taking an alert about like a go nil pointer crash in production, right? This is going to page an engineer automatically. So the idea was like, I want to start a Nova agent that's going to like take the stack trace from that crash and then go and see like, can it root cause it? And then can it like recreate it with a test and then like fix it and then see that the test is passing, right? And I was trying to do this all in just a one-shot prompt. And like, I don't know, maybe Fable 5 could do it, but like the models I was working with at the time, it was just a little too complex for it to handle all of that in one context window. So what we're looking at next is like using temporal as a way to kind of stage more complex workflows. And in my mind, like the key benefit there will be like having more control over the context window for different parts of, things running, where you can just, I don't know, give the model like more signal on more focused tasks rather than trying to like fix a large task all on its own.
Interesting. Anything else, Kevin, you want to add?
No, I mean that's pretty much it. We've been having the debate internally about how much of orchestration should be deterministic versus agentic. Yeah, and I think that's a pretty interesting like area.
Okay, so maybe I think like one way to think about it is, are there specific tasks today that Nova can do better versus things that you still feel developers may want to do it locally or kind of like with more interactivity?
I mean, I don't know about you, Chris. I think Cloud Code and Codex will always be better, right? And I think that's not the point of Nova, right? We're
Okay.
not going to beat them at their own game. What we're going to do is provide convenience and cloud capabilities and the integrations and things like that. And I actually see this is somewhat off topic, but I actually see this in the future getting into an area where Codex and Cloud Code are going to be calling Nova. So you're going to open up Codex and you're going to say, do this and this and this and this, and here's like this long, complex task I have. And then Codex is going to use Nova as its agent to go make code changes. And when Nova's done and it comes back to Codex and said, I did it, Codex can read the changes. You did a good job. You did a bad job. Thank you for providing me with this integration data that you have. But I don't see us as beating them with like the interactivity or the harness or anything like that, right?
Interesting. So in a way, kind of like you're saying is this is a great way to offload task even from like a running coding agent and it runs in background. I mean, technically
Yeah.
you can probably do that with APIs and MCP, right? I mean, if you have built it already as a platform.
Right. Yeah. So we've got like a Nova MCP that can go spawn jobs. So I don't know. One way to think about it is just it's like a sub agent, but just a much more well resourced sub agent, right? That has like a full development environment and like dedicated just for it.
Right. And also possibly like access to some of the internal capabilities that regular agent may not.
Exactly.
Very cool. So what do you think is today, maybe kind of like a wrapping up question, is the next big challenge? Like where do you see kind of like, the whole SDLC bottleneck or sort of like where is the biggest pain point even in your DX surveys?
I mean, we probably have differing answers here. I don't think it's the SDLC. My personal opinion is that it's enabling the agent to do. I mean, maybe you would call this the SDLC, but in my opinion, it's enabling the agent to do things over long periods of time and giving it the ability to manage its like logic across long periods of time, combined with the ability for it to take action on things such as deployment or PRs or watching metrics or looking at logs. So you can really kind of turn it into like a junior engineer, right? I want to tell the agent, hey, go migrate this endpoint from like this version of the API to that one. Make a PR. I want to comment on the PR. I want the agent to address my comments. I want to merge the PR, and I want the agent to just be smart enough to know that it needs to wait for the deployment, watch the logs, watch the metrics, ensure that it's all good. And during all of this, like it raises concerns to me, it messages me, and it says like, hey, this is wrong, that's wrong. So maybe you would call that the SDLC, but I guess I was thinking about it from maybe an implementation perspective, where the agent's able to handle the task from like a long, complex view rather than just, I guess, what I had been perceiving as the SDLC, which is like just the integration with all this stuff. Like,
okay.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Kevin, there. I guess one thing that I'm kind of passionate about is evals, just like as a way to help kind of validate like reputable workflows, right? And so one of the things we're looking at doing is making that easier for folks like outside our team to build their own evals and perhaps eval like a skill that they're adding or just like a common workflow that that people do, and like just kind of benchmark that so that we can, I don't know, learn from and experiment with like data that we've already got like in our repo and our history, just to see like how we can produce the best outcomes.
Very cool. Okay, all right. I know we are over time. So Kevin and Chris, thank you so much for your time. This was a great learning. We will definitely share the blog post as well so people can go and like find it. Do you have any plans on open sourcing any of this? Or this is too integrated in Dropbox to do any of that?
Yeah, I think we're too integrated for that right now. We do have an open source tool called Ratchet that you can find out on GitHub.
Okay.
That was an
Maybe
older
we will-
like open source type effort, but
Nice.
we've mostly inner source now.
yeah,
Okay.
I'd say
We will
Nova
probably
basically
link that.
is the wires between Dropbox services. So
Okay. Anyways, thank you again for your time. And thank you everyone who is listening. If you're interested in developer experience or work in platform engineering, join us at HangarDX. It's dx.community. Chris and Kevin, this was a blast. Thank you so much for your time.
thanks.
Thanks.